All right. Well, welcome everyone. We'll call to order the Public Works Committee meeting for June 26th. Beginning with our agenda, the open forum. Normally we would take comments from the audience. Not seeing anyone. I'll move on to the next item, approving the minutes from the April meeting. Anybody have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
To approve the minutes. Second.
Yeah, first, and I got a second. All in favor?
I got a question.
Okay, Dill has a question.
Did you have any contact with either Anderson Brothers or Knife River on them doing their own engineering? Or maybe you're getting into that later, I don't know.
So I'll follow up on, no, I can answer that. So after our meeting, I spoke with Jenny and she had me hold off on that because the project would require engineering based on the engineering warrants I gave you. And so the other thing that was gonna happen with that too is she felt the timing wouldn't allow that project to happen, and so we're gonna look at just rolling that into the 2025 road bond.
Who did you say you talked to?
Jenny, the city
Oh,
administrator.
The city administrator. So I think, Tom, then we left it that we would move ahead with Woodseth doing the surveying work just to keep it moving along, right?
Right, and we talked about all of that, and then after the meeting, Jenny approached me and wants us to follow. We agreed, I should say we agreed to merge it into the 2025 road bond. So that survey work and anything else that we need them to do on those two roads will be a part of their proposal to do engineering for the entire 25 road bond.
Along with the rest of these roads that you got pictures of. and-
Yeah, so
yeah,
this,
Okay,
yeah, these are the roads for the 25 road
Yep,
bond on
yep.
here. And so
Okay.
you'll see Sumac is on here. That's,
Okay.
it's the top one that I'm pointing at.
okay.
So what is being done this summer, anything? On the road?
This summer, just maintenance, just crack sealing and that kind of thing will get done.
Weren't there a couple of short, small roads and streets that were considered?
Yeah, we were talking last time about Sumac and Lendy.
Yeah.
Those are the two I'm talking about that are gonna get rolled back into the 25 road bond. They were too small on their own. We felt to get decent pricing for the engineering, so we're hoping that by making that part of that,
I see.
the cost could be spread over a much bigger project and we wouldn't.
Jill, will you
Kill
pull
it.
the mic closer to you? I think.
It's on. You hear it now? That's all I had.
Okay. I don't know if any of you were listening to the last city council meeting. I actually put this list of roads in front of the city council. And so this list has been approved by them to move forward with the project, so. So now we just need to set up the scope and then Bill will provide us with a proposal to do the engineering for that. So the first part of that I provided, you know, kind of based off of some of the feedback I've been getting from you and a few others on the new bike trail. I decided to put together a drainage scope for that bond. So that's why you have all these pictures of the different drainage issues. So that way we can follow them through the project, make sure that they're being corrected.
Tom, does that work that you're outlining in these pictures, does that go along with the bid that's gonna be let for the road work?
Say that again.
You're focusing on the drainage issues of these roads that you gave us pictures of.
Yeah,
Is that part of the whole project? Okay,
yes.
you just wanted to get a handle on what drainage issues and
Well,
what needs to be done.
it seems like drainage has been where we've struggled. And with road projects, I guess, you know, getting that done, it seems to be half the battle, so.
Mm-hmm.
One thing with the northern half, a lot of these roads are in the northern half of, the city. And that's where we seem to have the most topography and washouts, and so for my crews. Getting a hold of that and fixing it permanently will help us quite a bit, so.
Okay.
After getting feedback from Dill and Joe and a few others about drainage on the bike trail and a few other things, I thought, well. I took advantage of all this heavy rain that we've had so far
Yeah.
this spring, and I went out and cataloged every place that we were having trouble. And so it made sense to. Put this together, I think.
Is Grandview included in any of this work then in 25,
26.
26?
Yep.
Have you had conversations with them as far as,
I have not. I needed to, well, so just to give you a little inside baseball, what's going on, I had this that I was getting ready. And then we're also moving into our budget season. So that's kind of occupying my time. Once I get past my preliminary budget work, I'll probably start diving into the 26 stuff. It's hard to do much with Grandview in the summer anyway. They're busy. So to try to set up meetings or anything usually doesn't go very well, but I think by the time we get into, say, maybe September, October, I should have some of the background work like this done. And we can start talking to them a little bit more formally on what we're gonna do there, so.
what's the thinking? Is that going to be done just like the rest of them as far as payment goes? Or is Grandview gonna contribute?
I don't know yet. Again, Jenny's been talking to me about that a little bit. We're looking at the assessment policy. I think it will depend a lot on what gets done. You know, if it's just a simple paving project through there,
Yeah.
we probably won't do anything with the assessment. If we start doing all the curb, the gutter, the drainage and all, a bunch of other things, then I could see where we'll dig into that harder. And we have to see what the council's appetite is for
Yeah,
changing an assessment policy too.
I'm just curious.
But yeah, that is work I need to do yet. All right. So I guess we're still looking for vote on the minutes. Are all in favor of approving the April minutes?
I,
Yeah, opposed? None. The next item is, I have a proposal from Woodseth regarding lift station 1 rebuild. So if any of you are familiar, that's one of the 2 main lift stations that we have. This one happens to be on Hazelwood. If you cross over 371 on the roundabout and you take a left on the Hazelwood, you'll see it on the left, kind of right by the old phone company building there, or the creek. And so what we anticipate is gonna happen is, some of you may know that there's a big chunk of property on 371 just south of Holiday that's looking like it's being sold and it's probably gonna be developed before long. And so with that, the lift station 12 that we were talking about, and Schaefer's, we're looking to do an expansion on the east side of 371. That lift station would also serve a big chunk of that airport, the old airport property on the west side too. When lift station 12 was built, it's anticipated that it's going to dump into lift station 1. And so part of what their proposal is to study, can the current lift station or a rebuild of the lift station handle that flow? What improvements do we have to make to lift station 1 to handle the increased flow from lift station 12? We already, my staff feels that we need more holding capacity in the barrel. And so that was one of the items, scope items. I will pass out a list. This is what I gave to Woodseth to work off of to develop their proposal. Get one back.
So these items are on their contract here, I see, pretty much.
Say that again, Bill.
I say these items are basically are what they talk about here on their
It is, yeah.
proposed, yeah.
Yeah, so these are things that we're modeling, this rebuild largely after what we did with Lift Station 3 down in Grandview, if you're familiar with that project. We're adding backup, dedicated backup generation. What we're finding is that more and more of our citizens have backup generators. And so they're able to flush during a large storm. And so we find ourselves scrambling with our trailer generator to keep up with that. So this would at least give us, our two main lift stations would have dedicated backups. So that's why that's in the scope. The barrel size, lift station 1 is the only one that has, we had a power outage a few years ago where we had a backup into a home. That's the only backup we've had into a home in the 17 years I've been here, was off of that lift station. So what this will help us with is it'll give us a increased reaction time if something goes wrong down there. We can get something coordinated to prevent that. Let's see, what else do I have? Force main evaluation. This is just making sure that what, the lift station will have, when it's rebuilt, will have about a 50-year lifespan. So is the force main that we have there, the 6-inch, is that still adequate? Does it need to be upsized once lift station 12 is added on to that? It's just a verification or letting us know what size force main should we have coming off of that. SCADA, we're not gonna add SCADA to it at this time, but what we are looking to do is set it up that it can be added as easily as possible. None of our system right now has SCADA. We have what's called Guard Dog. It's a cellular alarm system. It's a little bit simpler than what SCADA is. SCADA would allow us to see wet well levels, silence the alarms, basically all the functions of any gauge or monitoring equipment that you might have throughout the process. You can see on a computer screen. Right now, we don't have that capability, but I can see where we will probably add that in the next 10 years, maybe. So I wanted it to be ready for that. Flight pumps, that's feedback from when we did lift station 3. Prior to that, we had a requirement that our pumps needed to be flight. We're going back to that. It's mostly for spare parts and reliability. It's just, when I worked for City of Hutchinson, we had the same requirement. It just saves us a lot of headaches in operation and maintenance. So we're gonna insist on that. And then security, fence and lighting. That's just a reality of the world we live in now. And being this was roughly half of our sewer system, if somebody messes with this, they could cause quite a bit of damage, so. And the lighting is also for us to do maintenance. If, something comes up in the middle of the night and my guys have to be there, that gives them a little help. Being able to see what they're doing.
How much room is available there on that lift station 1 site?
We're gonna evaluate that.
Does it go across to the highway?
I don't know that it goes that far, no.
You don't know?
I haven't looked at the exact footprint of it, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't go to the highway.
And then there's a property directly north of that. That's
Yeah,
kind
so
of
that-
up on a rise
the-
there. I don't know what that is.
It was an old CTC phone. It's not, I wanna call it Quest, but it's not Quest. It's still a phone company building. I don't know how much room there is between us and them, or if we're gonna need any of that. That's something Bill's gonna be evaluating for us.
I have a question or two for Bill whenever you're done.
Sure. Jump right on in. I'm
Okay.
kind of to the end here.
Bill, in this proposed contract here, you have, on the second page, you have not to exceed $46,450. And I wondered what you base that figure on.
That's based on the summary or the, so, be like the site survey, 5,000.
Well, I understand you add those up and you get to 46, but what's the basis of that? It seems to me at this point, you don't really know what is going to be done.
Well, a lot of that $46,000 roughly is for evaluating what is needed, what the scope of work could be, and figuring out, like everything that is needed in order to create the lift station, and then designing. So there's a lot of preliminary work that needs to be done along with the design.
Well, I understand all that, but how did you come up with that figure? How do you know what it's going to be when you don't know what work you're going to be doing?
Well, we had to make some assumptions as to how we are going to get to that point. That's why we call it a cost not to exceed. Hopefully we don't need that much money and we come back and it's cheaper than that. But we had to make some assumptions. Oh, sorry. And we had to make some assumptions as to what that might be.
Well, usually on something like this, I mean, this is what I would call a fixed price contract. And usually on something like this, usually they do something like a feasibility study to determine exactly what's going to be done in the engineering contract. It's sort of like, to me, like getting the cart before the horse here. I would think, first of all, you should do a feasibility study to determine what the problem is, what the potential solutions are, what it's going to cost, and so on. And then you recommend a course of action. See, to me, that's all part of the design, and that's usually done first.
And that's what's in here. It's just not separated out as into a feasibility study and then design. So a lot of that work, as far as the evaluation of the what is needed and all that, is included in this design services budget, I guess you'd say, or fee.
Well, the problem with a fixed price contract is that all too often, regardless of what happens, you end up pretty close to what the fixed price was. It opens the door to a lot of things. Now, I'm not saying it would, but it does, just from practical experience. And to me, the first thing that should be done is a feasibility study. And this is not something that's got a lot of boilerplate and fluff and so on. It's just stating what the problem is and what the solutions are, the possible solutions, and what you think should be done. And then the city decides whether they want to do that or whether they want to do something else. And on that basis, then you determine what your contract price is going to be, because until then, you don't know what you're going to be doing. And what you have here, just setting up a kind of a general contract not to exceed. Well, that could be any figure.
Well,
Follow me?
in a way, but we're going about getting to the completion of this lift station project in a slightly different manner than what you're proposing with a feasibility study. Exactly. Like I said, the feasibility study is buried in the design services, and throughout the process, we'll be meeting with Tom to go over these things that we come up with and how we want to move forward with it. And that, again, that's part of this design services amount. So
Yeah,
it's not like we're going to be working in our,
it's buried in there, but until you know exactly what you're going to be doing for design, how do you know what it's going to cost?
you have to make some assumptions, and that's,
Well, no,
this
you
part.
don't. I mean, generally, a feasibility study is done, and that's part of the engineering. And quite often, that feasibility study is done for nothing because it's part of the design. If it's if an engineer wants to be paid for that, that's fine, but then it's usually deducted from the design fee because it's part of the design. And to me, you got the cart before the horse here. First, you got to decide what you're going to do with that lift station. Then you decide what it's going to cost to do that, to design it. That's the way it's usually done.
I think, Tom, can I jump in here?
Sure.
I guess I was going to ask a question that even goes a little bit further back from what Dill's talking about, because frankly, this is the first time I've seen this. And kind of adding on to what Dill was saying, normally you would come to the committee or to the council and say, this is what we want to do. This is our problem. This is what we want to solve, and call it a feasibility study or whatever before it would come. But now, before it would come, you know, to the decision process. But now it seems like the whole thing's coming all at once. Identify the problem and give us a, you know, a solution and a dollar figure. Is that normally the way that you would handle these kinds of projects?
I can't say normally because we've only done one other project like this
Okay,
since I've been here, and that was Lift Station 3. And so that was the template for this. And so really what we're looking at, from my point of view, is we have a lift station now that was built in 1991. If I could do the math in my head, that's
33 years ago.
33 years old.
mm-hmm,
And there's a lot of issues with it because of its age, but the other thing is its capacity, and then we're looking at expansion. And so some of the, why this came up is I was being told that this airport property is about to move forward, which means Lift Station 12 is gonna happen. And while it hasn't come to this committee, budget-wise, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had on the radar a rebuild for Lift Station 1. We've had an estimate in the budget for that. Well, that money was budgeted for 2025. So this isn't an emergency by any means. I mean, we can take a month to talk about this or do another step if we need to. I guess I didn't think about it, a feasibility study.
Well, the reason I bring that up, Tom, that's based on my experience, and I don't know all, but I've been through a lot of these, and that's almost always the way it's done.
Mhm.
And also, quite often, in fact, most of the time, engineering design is paid for as a percentage of the bid price, the low bid price. That's the way it's done. And this fixed price type thing, I think, just opens too many avenues to problems that we shouldn't have. I mean, the city shouldn't have, meaning costing them a lot more than it should.
Mm.
So, you know, a feasibility study for this should easily be done in 60 days. And it's usually done by people that are higher up engineers in the business that have experience with that. And they're the ones that usually do the feasibility study.
Mhm.
And then the city takes this feasibility study, and if they agree with what the engineer decided was best to do, then you go ahead and do the design. And then at that time, you determine what the engineering contract is going to be, because then you know what you're going to be designing.
Yeah, I guess I've kind of thought that we had at least a good idea of what we were gonna be dealing with there, because we had done a drainage study for Lift Station 12 when we were looking at the Schaefer's addition. So Lift Station 12, they got a good idea of what the flows would be from that at that time.
Well, you have kind of a unique problem here. For one thing, you've got a real long force main that's 6 inches. Now, normally that would be a 4-inch force main because 120 gallons a minute is peanuts. The reason I believe they made it 6 inches is because of all the friction loss in that long force main. But what that does, that limits how much you can force through that at higher quantities, because you've got that long friction loss through there. So it's kind of a unique problem. You are limited as to what you can do there. And I would go, I would try everything possible to avoid putting in a new wet well and pumps if I could get around it. Because that's going to be a really expensive proposition. You've got 3 sewers coming in there, active sewers, and you've got 1 force main. You got to keep all those 4 going during the whole construction process, and you've got a stream that's going right by.
Yep,
It's going to be quite a job.
yep.
And it's a limited area. And if I could avoid doing most of that, I certainly would. And there might be solutions out there and there might not be. One of them could be variable speed pumps. I don't know if they make a variable speed submersible pump. If they did, that would be an ideal situation to put it in and leave this wet well the way it is.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that they have, but I don't believe that they've worked very well. I don't know what the reliability is. with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you too. Now you were talking about the pump start stop cycles. What has been your experience over the last, how old are the pumps that are in there now?
They've either been rebuilt or reworked, but, I couldn't tell you for sure. They're different ages, the 2 of them.
You mean like 5 years or 10 years or
Oh, they're all of 5 years.
5 years? Who is concerned about the start stop cycles? Is it because it detrimental to the pump motors or what?
Well, it'll shorten their life. I mean, I don't know that we're getting the life cycle out of them that we want.
Well, that was my question. How long have they been in there?
I would have to find out.
No.
I don't think it's been very long, but that's part of the problem that we rebuilt them once or replaced them once
Mhm.
already ahead of when they should have likely needed it.
Well, Flight's a good pump. They were the originator of the,
Right, and I
Of
don't know
the
if there are even flights
submersible
in there
pump.
anymore, to be honest with you. I think we may have gotten something
Yeah.
else. But that's what we want.
Yeah, they're a
going
good pump.
forward.
But there again, now, somebody has to determine whether or not it's better to put in new pumps every 5 years for 20 years, or spend one hell of a lot of money redoing that whole lift station.
Well, that's the suggestion I'm looking to get from the engineers is,
Now, and that's what a feasibility study would tell you.
Yeah.
It's one of the things it would tell you. It would also tell you the difference in expenses, what it would cost. And then you have to figure, you have to amortize that depending on the life of these things and so on.
Mhm.
And that's why it's done that way.
right.
I mean, I know what you're doing here, but you're kind of throwing it all in one pot here. And you can't really get a realistic handle on the engineering expense until you know what you're trying to do. And that's what a feasibility study will tell you.
Right, but I guess we were probably looking at it more simply than that. We knew it needed to be rebuilt. We wanted increased capacity, holding capacity for when there's a problem. So that we have time to get there with workman generators or whatever we need.
You definitely need a generator. But
So-
there again,
so,
it's
right.
it's not cut in stone that number 12 would go into that system. It could go over the hill over to Grandview.
Well, I think we've studied that quite a bit though, and that was the consensus that it would go there.
But has it been formally studied?
Yes.
Yes, I'd say it has.
Has it?
yeah.
Okay, and then it won't work?
What?
Well, say for instance, if you can't get the capacity out of lift station 1, could you run it over there over the hill? I mean, that's an option.
Possibly, yeah.
Those are things that a feasibility
I
study.
think we
tells
looked at
you.
it and was a shorter run to go through 1 is
Mhm.
largely why I was going there. There's been other issues with number 1 too, odors running through the resort. So,
Now, the population in Nisswa has been static, the way I understand it, for the last 10 years. So where is all this extra flow coming from?
well, I know the sign says that it's static. I don't believe that for a second. just look around. I mean, we have how many more new homes? You know, so even if they're only here a couple weeks out of the year, there's clearly more
Mhm.
flow. So
Yeah, I don't understand it either.
I, I don't do the
But if
census
you,
work, so I don't
but if
know.
you expect federal help on it, they're gonna question that.
Well, I don't think we're getting federal.
Well,
help.
maybe you won't, but you know, it's there. All I'm saying is putting this all in one pot before you even know what you're actually gonna be doing is just not a very good way to do it.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
yeah, no, I understand. If you want to back up and, look at it from as a feasibility study, we can do that.
That would be
If
my
that- How does the
recommendation.
rest of the committee feel about doing that?
I guess I would add, Tom, that, like I said before, you guys are experts in this stuff, but it's a project. And my experience has been that kind of along the same lines that Dill's talking about, that you would bring, you know, what's the, the issue here that's to be studied to, like to this committee and then eventually to the city council. And, in terms of a feasibility study or, whatever you want to call it. And then at that point, determine what, how you're going to attack the, what the possible solutions are, how you're going to attack the problem, get an engineering firm on it. But I agree, this is like all in one, the feasibility study and the engineering design services. If that's the way you do it, but you were saying before that this is kind of, it's a project that doesn't come up very often.
No, and I was
This
trying to
scope of
think
project.
with Lift Station 3, I don't
Yeah.
recall that we did a feasibility study there either, to be honest with you. Not that we shouldn't have.
If it's
I'm just
not an
saying I don't believe we did.
emergency, we got to get this done thing right now, I guess I would follow what Dill's saying and kind of step back and do a feasibility study before you go into a full-blown project like this. That's just my opinion as well.
Okay.
To make sure that you're going down the right, road to get to the solution that you want.
Makes sense to me. Joe, do you have a opinion or a comment on what we're looking at?
Obviously I missed the first part of it, but yeah, I guess, with all of this, and kind of, I'll just say other things related to this, I would tend to agree that there just needs to be, maybe I'll use the word process, or standard way of doing things in places when stuff like this comes up, and just, getting, obviously, Dill has a lot more insight into that, but yeah, just getting the right process in place and the steps, because this isn't the only one, I look ahead down the road with other things that the city's looking at doing, expanding for, and just kind of fine tuning this process, because it's not the only lift station that we're gonna need to
true.
address here in the
Mhm.
real near future. And
Mhm.
so I'm almost wondering, with this, do we take a step back and kind of go, okay, if we're gonna do all this work, do we need to look at it even bigger and more comprehensive with what's coming in the future down the road, without, I guess, speaking out of turn with other stuff that everybody might not know here that the council's been talking about.
Sure, I thought kind of everybody here was aware of, the study we did for Lift Station 12. And
Sure.
that's largely what's driving this, and
Sure,
then we've gotten the trigger lately with the airport property
right,
sale.
yep,
That we're likely gonna need Lift Station 12. Well,
correct,
no sense building Lift Station 12 if Lift Station 1 isn't ready to receive what
correct.
Lift Station 12 is gonna generate.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the whole thing. And then what actually is going on there. And I do agree that, kind of a big picture.
So without the expansion,
All right,
we were ready from from an operator
Right.
standpoint. We were ready to rebuild lift station one for one, its age,
all right.
panel concerns. We didn't have backup generator. These are all things that with no expansion, we would want to do anyway.
Yeah, and for me, just with like the airport property, just some stuff that in the last month has been thrown out there with possible changes on location and height, you know, where it was going, because it was going in the bottom of the hole. Now we were just told a month ago it can come up top. And so in just the last, I'll say 60 days, the information that I have received on that in the other meetings is all of a sudden it can be in a different location and it increased in elevation about 40 feet. And I'm just kind of going, okay, well, obviously there's been some engineering work done behind that, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
This lift station 12.
Yeah, lift station 12, you know, was always gonna go in the bottom of the hole.
Yeah, it was gonna go
Over
right
the-
at the end of Smiley Road.
Correct, down at the lowest point.
Mm-hmm.
For obvious reasons to have it in lowest point. We were just told at the last meeting that it could now move up to the top of the hill and not at the end of Smiley Road.
That's news to me, I guess.
Correct. And so for that reason, I'm kind of going timeout for the last 4 or 5 years. It was always at the bottom of the hill.
Can you say what this is?
It's with, you know, potential more land acquisition, you know, land that
Housing?
the cities,
Commercial
no,
or
for the city.
I
So
mean, what the airport, property is gonna be used for?
don't know the full details of that yet.
I'm kind of in the dark, so I don't know.
Right, yeah, and so that's where I'm not sure how much I can say or share with that. But knowing that information and tying that together with what we were just told there, like I say, in the last 60 days, contradicts some stuff. And so it's like, you know, I'm much in agreement, like, we need a bigger picture, because all of a sudden we're making stuff flow uphill and that doesn't make sense. And
Probably regardless of what they do, the lift station's gotta go down in that low point. That's just common sense.
right, yeah.
That's
So,
another argument, I guess.
You're right, yeah, but I'm just using it as an example because I bring that up because it was,
No, I appreciate why. So the genesis of what you got from
Right.
what's up tonight. I provided the,
Yep.
a scope,
yeah, and I had read through that prior.
and you know, we were from operations.
Right.
We were ready to rebuild lift station one, regardless of what's going on with that
Correct,
property. We were told several years ago that lift station one would receive the flow from lift station 12, no matter where it was gonna go
Yep.
down. So that's why that's on the scope.
yep,
And the reason it comes up now is we're entering into budget season. Lift station one was on last year, had been placed into 2025 for a
Mhm.
rebuild. Well, we need harder numbers now. What are we gonna need for lift station one? For the budget purpose.
Correct.
And so our best guesstimate till we get this study done is what we spent on lift station three. Well, things have changed quite a bit since lift station three. Lift station three was built at the height of COVID. Hopefully prices have stabilized. I'm sure that they've got to be better than they were then. I mean, I'm sure they're higher, but you know, they're not doing this anymore, so.
Well, I think somebody better take a hard look at lift station one force main. Cause that's a 6-inch force main, which normally would carry a high flow.
Mhm.
The only reason I can see that they put it in there to start with was because it's a long force main and the friction loss in there was such that they had to go to a 6-inch.
Right, and the reason I had brought up looking at that was coming out of lift station three, coming up to the plant is a long run too.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last few months, I've had our pump company and sewer operator question if it was Cause I think that's also a 6-inch, if that's big enough. Cause they don't think that they're getting the flow out of the pumps out of lift station 3 that they should see. And it's a friction
And
thing,
that's my point, because
but it maybe is still adequate. Maybe it just is, you're just not gonna get the performance out of the pumps that we have in there with that size force main, but it may still have plenty of capability to haul, to bring all the.
well,
what
it has
we
a
need to bring up.
capability, but if you, friction loss gets too high, your pump horsepower goes clear up
Right.
and, that just doesn't work.
So like that comes down to, is it a power consumption? Would the power
Hmm.
consumption pay for bigger, a bigger force main?
That's why you need a
Yeah.
feasibility study.
I guess the other thing with that and stuff, and, I don't know it inside and out, but I think over the next 5 years, we're gonna see a tremendous, boom in more building activity, more so than anybody might think or realize. There's just some talk out there in the community with some of the people that would be involved with that, once the corridor study's done, and these backage roads goes in, it might just strike off something more so than what we've seen in the last 20 years in Nisswa to take off with building. And I think, doing a study like that and actually, okay, if this all got lotted off, how much would we have coming in, stuff like that.
See, you can what if all the way down though.
Right.
So even when we were looking at, the Schaefer's project.
Right,
We were asking other developers at that time, please give us some kind of inkling of what you're thinking so that we can size infrastructure
Right.
going forward. Nobody has really shared anything like that with me.
sure.
Well, so I have to take my best guess. I'm not even getting everything shared with me that the city's up to.
Right,
So it's
Exactly, so-
impossible for me to do anything other than what I've done,
right,
so.
yeah. So that's,
So it's not details of what we have in here in this, proposal from Widseth. I think it's more process that we're questioning.
maybe,
And
Okay, well, let's talk about a process then. So if we back up to kind of what Dill's saying for feasibility study. Is that the right step then? I mean, how often do what would trigger feasibility? I mean, at some point, you don't want to be spending. Cause a feasibility study is probably gonna cost us something too.
Well, I don't know, what would trigger it, but in my experience, and I don't know all by any means, is almost always you do a feasibility study on anything like that.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do with dollars or anything like that.
so what,
See, these fixed price contracts, they're just dangerous. I mean, they work, but there's a lot of room in them for fraud. Possible. So that's why I like to see percentage type contracts, which is pretty much the norm as far as I know. Percent of the construction bid, low bid. That there's like, say for the design, it might be anywhere from 5 to 10%. On a job like this, it might be 8%. Depends on how technical it is and how much work there is.
Mhm.
But the percentages are usually used. That's very common. I don't know if Nisswa has enough projects coming up to, have a policy on that or not. But-
so I'd step in absolutely, and you're headed in the right direction, and just sitting here listening to it, and you hit on it, Tom, too. And I guess maybe it's not the right place or time, but more vocal. I had actually requested you to be in some of these meetings with this information that I was talking about, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so you're not getting all the proper information you need to come to a meeting like this. And I'd say step back one thing further, from a whole city level, it needs to change at a higher city level on how stuff is done. how department heads are communicated with, and this is just a prime example of what I'm seeing from a council level to change, because I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying, and I think it really starts from the council leadership all the way down through a project like this, and it needs to change, because to your answer, the amount and dollar work of projects that is before the city in any one of these areas, you know, you just take the park project or anything like that. All that needs to be done on all these different levels from a big picture with all the potential that is coming down or being talked about. And that's not for this committee, but it's just my viewpoint on what needs to change at a real high level from the city working its way down. So that we can do this, implement this.
I
Mr.
think-
Chair, I totally agree with you. And, you know, these decisions, they begin and they end with the city council.
Right.
They're the final decision makers. And if city councils are comfortable with just getting a report that kind of rolls everything into one, you know, into one package and yes or no, well, then that's up to them. But the smart way to do it is to do it as a process.
Correct.
And study the problem, come up with some options, and then you make a decision based on the study that you've done.
Right.
And then you decide, you know, which direction you're gonna go. And anytime a feasibility study is talked about, I don't think it's, you know, it's a question of money, because you're gonna save money by studying the project, you know, getting a whole view of it. I agree with Dill on this, that, you know, rolling everything into one package is, you know, you just don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, and I mean, I hope not getting off topic, but you know, even like the downtown study that we're doing, right? You know, with that and kind of getting the plan put together. So that would be, in my opinion, a piece of information that we'd want, you know, too, with that study that we're looking at moving ahead with, you
Mhm.
know, and trying to incorporate and stuff. But, and I know it doesn't answer the question, what do we do right now for budgeting purposes for 2025 to get this fixed and get it going? And you know, I don't know how you kind of shift gears already moving, so to speak, on something like this. But,
Well, one thing I've seen is these, these things change year to year too.
right,
And at some point you gotta, this is the plan we're going with, and whatever happens after, we'll have to deal with it there. You know, for instance, Grandview might have plans that we don't know about
right,
that will impact the Station 12, which would then impact the Station 1. Well, we don't have that information, so we have to go with what we know.
mhm,
And for me, this is what I
Right.
know what I know. I know there's something coming out of Lift Station 12. I know there's something going to happen with the airport property that will affect this, but I don't have any kind of flows. I don't know what
right,
is going there,
right,
so. And I don't know that I will until after the infrastructure is built, even if we go through a process
right.
like this. So I'm not sure where do we go from here? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. What process do we put
How
in
long does
place
it
to
take?
protect us?
Something like this, 60 days. It's not you don't, put a lot of fluff in it and all the boilerplate and so on. It's just feasibility studies are very simple usually.
Well,
And
Joe
to the
did one
point.
for Lift Station 12.
Pardon?
I said Joe Dubell with Seth did do that for Lift Station 12. You know, we have that map. I think I've shared with you
Yeah.
the area it would serve. And then I think he actually gave some estimates of flows that could come in.
You're still dealing with, estimated costs, but you cost out all the various options. So
Mhm.
that gives you an idea what's the most economical and so on.
Mhm.
But you gotta put in, life, life expectancy of things. Cause some things are 20 years, some things might be 30 years, some pumps might be 5 years.
Mhm.
But it's just a way, I don't know when that evolved, but they've been doing it that way for tens and tens and tens and tens of years, as far
Mhm.
as I know.
I guess.
So I guess I would suggest that, the city asked them if they would be interested in doing, the engineer, if they would be interested in doing a feasibility study. As I said, usually the feasibility study is part of the engineering design. Considered that. So if they want to be paid for the feasibility study, that's fine, but then when they do the engineering design, that is usually deducted from what they would get for the design because it's part of it.
Yeah. So we've done feasibility studies when we did the expansions of the sewer plant.
Okay?
That has happened. But I don't know that we've done that for any of the lift stations that we've done here. Really, like I said earlier, we don't do a lot of
Mhm.
them.
Well, I think it's where you have options, and here, that long force main bothers me. You know, you just can't force much more flow through that. The problem is you barely have enough flow now to keep the solids from settling out because it's a 6-inch line and you only have 120 gallons a minute. That's peanuts. But as soon as you increase that, then the friction loss goes up in that long force main. So that limits how much you can really put through it. Normally, you could put a lot higher flow than that through a 6-inch force main. So that may be a limiting factor as to what you can do with that lift station.
Mhm.
And if you put in new force main, you're talking about a big expense, you know,
Right.
all the way to the plant.
Right.
So to me, I mean, it's a potential problem that I don't think is being addressed. And Nisswa is unique because all the flow to the plant is pumped. You know, most plants, it comes in by gravity and, or most of it does.
Mhm.
Here, everything's pumped, and that's why you have to get a generator on this main lift station. That's another reason to do that.
Mhm. Well, I guess just for the interest of time here, we'll take a step back and I'll talk to Bill after the meeting, sometime the next few days about what should be in a feasibility study for this project and.
Yeah, and I'll be happy, you know, if you want to talk about it, Bill, well, I'd be happy to.
Oh,
talk about it.
we've done feasibility studies before
Sure.
for stuff like this. We just, yeah.
Be happy to talk to you about it or help you.
Yeah, if you have thoughts about it too, you know.
Yeah.
Stop
But
that.
it's not something that has to be drug out. It can be done, you know, 60 days or 90 days, I would say, whatever they would
Yeah.
know. It's not something that has got to be drug out for a long time.
Right, if we want it to, if we want the results of this to be in for the 25 budget.
Yeah.
It can't. get
But
drawn
I
out
think you
too
got to
far.
be careful you don't let the budget drive the process. I mean, sure, it's got to have something to do with the process,
Mhm.
but the timing of the budget shouldn't be driving how this is happening. I mean, you might have to change your budget,
Mhm.
shift it. And from what I'm hearing here, you know, there's a lot going on that I don't know about.
Right,
And I also know those things can change from day to day. And what's here might be gone tomorrow, you know,
right.
you don't know.
You know, what Joe was saying is quite a bit of optimism. I've heard a lot of pessimism if you
Yeah.
think more nationally as far as
Yeah.
what the economy and everything is gonna do. So, you know, how do you know? You take your
Right.
best educated guess on this stuff and you move forward. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that with the 18 development. When I started here, that had just been finished, the infrastructure there. It sat dormant for 17 years before a house was built.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, so you're gonna talk with Widseth and come up with a
Right.
plan of action. And
So,
just so, would that feasibility study, a draft of it come back to this committee before it
Yes.
would go on to the city council?
yes,
Okay. I think that would be a wise thing to do,
that's my intention.
just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Right.
Joe, do you want to take over the chair of the meeting or do you want me to continue?
So I can on to number 4 then.
Yes,
on the number for the 2025 road bond updates drainage scope.
So what, everybody has a copy of this. And so I don't know if there's a whole lot you have to, comment on that, but I prepared this for Widseth, because much like this that we got for lift station one, we're looking to get a proposal for them to do the engineering for a 2025 road bond. And so I think you weren't here yet, Joe, but I had mentioned that, you know, because of feedback from Dill and you and some others regarding drainage with the trail that was recently completed, I wanted to try to avoid some of those issues with the roads. And we know we have drainage issues with the roads. And given the heavy rain that we've had, I took advantage of that and I went out and I took pictures of problem areas on the roads in the 2025 road bond. And so then I listed all those here, so that as we move through the design process and the construction process, we have something to compare back to see, are we gonna get our problems fixed? And when the project's done, have they been fixed? And so this will be a record of what was going on beforehand. And it also details a few other things, like, so we have some, what were more temporary measures to deal with drainage issues, in particular washing on steeper hills. You'll notice in here, there's quite a bit of asphalt gutter that's been installed over the years. Myself and my staff would like to see a lot of that improved to a concrete gutter, curb and gutter, trying to eliminate washouts that we've had, because
Where's that, Tom?
well, it's listed in here, so there's several items in here you'll see that calls out asphalt gutter and upgrading it to concrete.
Okay.
And that'll be kind of a new thing for the city in a way. At least as long as I've been here, concrete curb and gutter's been kind of shunned. People think it takes away from the ruralness of Nisswa. But I think what we spend on maintenance is a real thing too. And if we're constantly chasing damaged shoulders, damaged pavement, because we're not adequately dealing with drainage, then we're doing a disservice. I really don't think curb and gutter is something that's that much of a detriment to how Nisswa looks. I think we've seen enough examples of where that's been added, in and around the city. And it's been nothing but, I think, an improvement over what was there, overall. But, you know, there's some other things that I point out in here. You can see there's many areas where the water runs across the pavement or it sits on the pavement, and all those need to be fixed. So that's what this calls out. And, this will be considered in Widseth's proposal for engineering for the 2025 road bond. Now, given our recent discussion for the lift station, is there something about the process you would like to see done different? What's that?
Say again?
So, you know, given just our last discussion about the lift station, applying it to this 2025 road bond, is there anything that we should do different? Or
Oh,
does it make sense to go to a proposal for engineering services for plans and specs for the 25 road bond?
Is there any, Edna Lake Road, the pavement itself is horrible. And I see there's a lot on here that needs to be done on that road as far as curb and gutter. Is there any plans to repave it when they were in there doing?
Yeah,
all that?
that's part of it.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
so all I dealt with was with drainage. Paving to me is kind of matter of fact. You know,
When you go in and do something like that, you're gonna repave it. too.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, all of the roads on this list are gonna be repaved.
I think, Tom, in the big scheme of things, you have kind of a timetable on your roads and you've made that known at previous meetings and, you know, what your plans are for the, you know, the different, the way this project is going to progress, you know, in 25, 26 going forward. But I, I, I don't think that it needs a feasibility study. It's something that you have a process in place. You're looking, you know, now and 5 years from now and 10 years from now. You know, you've got a handle on it. And I think this is good information for you and for the committee and for the city council. So I don't, you know, as far as process goes, I don't think you need a feasibility study.
I agree. You know, there aren't a lot of alternatives here. I mean, you either do it or you don't.
Mhm.
Money might be a problem, but
Yeah, I was going to say that might be the only thing, because correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 3.5 times the price.
Yeah.
As what it was, you know, because of oil and costs and stuff, right? Per mile, that mile ratio from the last time, wasn't it about 3.5 times?
From Joe's first estimate, Joe DeBell's?
Well, no, from when we did it, the last time you did the bond,
Oh,
from bond to bond.
it's definitely higher.
Yeah, but there was a number, I thought it was about 3.5 times the price for a quarter mile that it's gone up, you know, it was, I remember it was like, now, don't quote me, but it was around 7 million for this. You had showed some numbers in comparison that
Yeah.
it had gone up. But it definitely higher, right?
Yeah.
And so there's gonna be a shock factor that just because, you know, in the last 4 years, we've had all this inflation, everything, this is gonna be significantly higher per mile, per whatever, than what it was. You know, it's just, it's gonna be a big number for the bond. Once it comes through the bond, that it's gonna be a higher price. Also too, with that, I do think that, you know, this, I'll say the Band-Aids of the asphalt curb, stuff like that. Yes, we're just getting more people, more traffic, more densely populated. I would like to see, you know, from the get-go that we do it to the best practices of today with the curbs, with the gutter, with the correct drainage, you know, because all that we're finding now is sure, we've saved the buck a few years ago and now we're paying it for it tenfold and it's only going to keep getting more expensive.
Mhm.
And so I guess that would be my insight, to do it one time, do it right from the get-go. And kind of show that, but also too, when it does come to the council because of the new price tag, because of the inflation. Does it help to have a study like this or something done? Because I think that we will probably have some taxpayers in the chair that's gonna have an issue with the dollar amount associated with it. And so does a study like that help? You know, is there any other sort of process like that that we need to be doing so that we can make it move forward easier or more,
I don't think a feasibility study
would help that?
No,
Okay.
no.
So that would be my only thing.
And you might get to a point where, you know, you have X amount of dollars and this is your bid. And so
Right.
now you're gonna have to pick and choose.
Right,
We're gonna do this, and this, and we're gonna have to
Some of it's gonna
leave
get
the other.
right. Yep.
So,
But yeah, I guess I would rather wait on something versus cut a corner and not put the curb and gutter in, you know, and so as far as letting the engineers know, that would be my preference is if we can't afford it, waiting is a better option versus cutting a corner would be my preference as we move forward with this process.
I would say your financial advisor would be more the person to talk to on that, you know,
Right.
than as
Yeah,
far as what the city can spend and if you're gonna move stuff and all that.
right. And we are engaged with them. So we're operating right now with him off of Joe's preliminary estimate. So this will just tighten up that estimate is really what it does.
Yeah,
And yeah, you know,
And we
totally
can-
right. I mean, we could get a proposal back and an estimate on what, a final estimate on what this could cost. And council will maybe determine they can't afford it, or maybe and just want to pull roads out of it or do something different. I mean, that's not always an option. You could even push the road bonds back, but then the cost of that, if you will, is
Yeah.
more pothole repairs and things of that nature.
Right.
This
You
is
went to-
really
you went
kind of
to
a
lot
warm up,
work here.
huh?
You went to a lot of work here.
Well,
Did.
I want it, if we do it, I want it to be done once right.
Mhm.
Right, yep.
Oh, did a good job.
Yeah, the pictures are very good and we found out on every project, you can never have enough pictures defining what the existing conditions are versus the final project, so.
And this is kind of a warm-up project for the 26 bond too, 'cause that's a kind of a bigger deal, like Joe alluded to earlier. We have a downtown master plan that'll feed into that, and we have an ADA study too that will feed into that, and some of the roads that are on that bond are, for instance, City Hall Street and Church Street. So, and they're, they will have curb and gutter and
Mhm.
drainage to deal with, so this is a simpler project for us to cut our teeth on.
How did you decide to use those two streets and curb and gutter those? I mean, what was the process?
For these,
Yeah,
mostly just because they're downtown, and right now we have drainage issues downtown, you want density. Well, so you can't just run water off into
Mm.
side
I just
side
curious,
properties,
yeah.
so really that's where the curb and gutter were coming in, is it's more of a traditional city look already.
Yeah,
We already have a lot of the curb and gutter, so for instance, on City Hall Street, there's some existing sidewalk, but it doesn't connect.
yeah, I've been harping about that for years.
Well, so
To you.
a lot of what we're gonna do, well, see, I've been listening. And so a lot of what we're planning to do is how do we make the connections? Make ADA compliance. And, does it work with a commercial flow of the downtown for the next 30 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
We wanna add to the business environment, not take away from it with the improvements we do, so.
What's the drainage situation downtown? I mean, to me, it looks like it's kind of marginal.
You have to wear rubber boots to go to the post office
Okay,
after the rain.
is that why they're moving the post office? Is that going to happen?
I don't know.
Has anybody heard
It's
it?
in the works.
There's ideas for it. I've heard a couple of competing ideas for it. Ultimately, it's up to the post office.
I figured because it was the post office, federal, it'd take forever for
That
them
is
to-
part of the problem.
Yeah,
We've at least hinted to them for a while that we would like to see if there was an alternative location for it. But now recently, they've taken charge of that.
ah,
One thing that was kind of a reaction to the post office being there, and now Main Street Ale House, is we're gonna be looking at a roundabout at this intersection because of the traffic and the way it moves there and doesn't move.
yeah,
Parking
it's a tough
issues.
intersection.
And then
Are you gonna
drainage,
use Tim's plan on that?
say that again?
Did Tim have a plan for that? The county engineer?
He just had the rough idea of a small roundabout, so we're just gonna take that idea and make it real. As far as drainage goes, we repaved Main Street a few years ago.
Right.
And at that time, we were just coming out of the last recession and there was no appetite to do drainage or sidewalks at that time. So what we're hoping to do is the work that we're gonna do on City Hall Street and Church Street. We want that to be the template for what would happen with Main Street when the pavement needs to be redone in the future. So we're hoping to figure out what does street lighting look like? What's the width of the sidewalks that we're gonna use? Handicap ramps, what do those look like? And so you'll be able to see them on City Hall Street. This is what our downtown will ultimately should go to. And then And then, we'll apply those same standards to the remaining streets in the downtown area.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So I guess with that, is there any questions about any of the details from the drainage thing that scope that I handed out, or anything that you maybe feel I missed? Otherwise, I guess,
Looks good.
there's no action that we have to take with it. This has just been provided the bill, and he'll incorporate this into the engineering for that bond. With that, I guess we can move on to item 5, Joe, if you want.
Yeah, item 5, anybody else have any concerns, questions, reports?
We, Mr. Chair, Tom, we had talked last meeting about this, the issue of burying power lines in downtown area, and the issue of, implementing franchise fees came up.
Mhm.
Did we do any, research on that?
I have not done
Okay.
any further work with that yet, no.
Okay.
I think some of that will come in with our downtown master plan. One of the questions we hope to ask, is there an appetite to bury power downtown?
Mm-hmm,
Because it's gonna be expensive.
mm-hmm.
And if there's no appetite for it, there's no sense in us spending any more dollars on designing it that way. And so, or if there is, if people don't care what it costs, they wanna see the power gone, invisible, if you will. Well, then, yeah, I think we need to look into that more. For me, the franchise fee was more about knowing what we have, where it's at. And then all the fee was going to do is just provide a little bit of money so that if I need staff or paper or whatever to manage all that we have it. Now, I don't have a template yet for franchise fees. I know several communities in the state use them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's quite common.
So I had brought up the idea of franchise fees a few years ago, and people thought that was gonna cause their their cable TV bills to go sky high. I don't think that's at all the case. It's more, we're becoming a city instead of a small town, and we need to know where things like cable TV are, fiber optics, gas lines, and right now, we're not requiring any of those utilities to provide us with that information. And we don't get anything for them using our right of way.
Right. Okay.
Anything else?
And, yeah. Otherwise, looks like, next meeting, July 31st, 5 o'clock.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
I
You
think-
need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah. Motion
So
to,
moved.
Second, third,
sounds good. All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.